Hello, everybody. This week I've mostly been working on map edits and the fishnet inspired method that Dr. Pingle and I have been talking about. So last week's goals, I've mostly, as I mentioned, I've mostly been figuring out edits for the maps. And Dr. Pingle and I discussed a good number of points, mostly based off of distance as opposed to just like a number of points. I've made some of the suggested edits in this particular map. I've narrowed it down to just Pingle, the Pingle algorithm with a coefficient of 14. That way it's easier to look at and easier to read, as 14 was the best coefficient for the Cusco area. I'm still having some difficulties figuring out colors. Dr. Pingle recommended blue or orange, so I'm gonna experiment around with those a bit as it gets more difficult to see the yellow in the higher regions, especially on this particular base map. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to send me a message via Slack, and I will take it into consideration. I also made a version that's on a grayscale base map. I'm not sure how I feel about this versus the green base, the colored base map. Stylistically, it is a little bit easier for me to see the yellow in the highlands. I decided to do two different dash lines. I made the lines a little bit thicker on this one, and I decided to go with two different styles of dash lines. To differentiate between the aerial, which is this one over here, and the linear, which is the one in the middle. So here's what they look like side by side. I'm gonna give you a moment. I'm gonna add the picture files of these two maps in, and if you want to take a second to look at them, I'm gonna pause for a second so you can pause as well. So with the fishnet method, Dr. Pingle and I were discussing how in the ANSYS CU, it probably wouldn't make as much sense to do the fishnet method, considering the terrain has very little variability. It's very flat, especially compared to the Andes. So instead of doing one big grid, we talked about focusing more on exit points from the Andes, as that will give some more useful information, whereas the grid would probably just be straight lines in the Amazon basin. And so I looked at the ANSYS CU is kind of curved in a couple directions. It's almost S-shaped, so it's like this a little bit. So we decided I've measured out what it would be from tip to tip along the center line, and it was about 3,200 kilometers. So based off that, the points are going to be about 100 kilometers apart. I'm thinking about 50 meters inside the Andes and 50 meters outside the Andes or 50 kilometers inside and 50 kilometers outside, to get a good look at that. And so I will be working on adding those points this week. And so my goals for this week are to continue writing and start the points for finding exits from the Andes this week, and hopefully send a draft of that to Dr. Pingle. And if it needs editing, then I'll edit that as well. Thank you. How to stop.